It's like we're making the light that would be there at the daytime. And then what do we do at nighttime? We go to sleep. So we'll go like this. Okay? All right, here we go. Ready? God created day and night, day and night. That was on the first day. That was on the first day. It was good. It was good. Oh, very, very good job. Next week, we're going to do that again. We'll do day number 1, and then we're going to add day number 2 to it as well. We are so glad all of you are back again tonight. Now, we are back to learn more about investigating creation tonight. And we, first of all, want to make sure that this is going to go where I want. Yep. Last week, we started talking about a big question. How did the world begin? And we really said there were 2 answers for how did the world begin that most people would get. Can anybody remember what were those 2 things that people might say? Connor, do you remember one?
A big explosion.
Okay, and do you remember the name for that big explosion? Had a big word. Starts with an E. And evolution. All right, evolution was one. And Kaylee, do you remember the other one? Okay, and do you remember what we call that idea, that God made it? Well, no, but we're going to come to that word here in just a minute, so keep reminding that word. Keaton, do you remember? Keegan, sorry. Well, not yet. What's the idea that God made the world? Yeah, creation. All right, so we said evolution was one idea, and creation was the other idea. Now, Kaylee, what is that big word that means an idea that has to be proved?
Hypothesis.
All right, a hypothesis. That's a big scientific word, but it's a good word, all right, to remember. So hypothesis means I have to be able to prove it. And we also mentioned a couple of other words. Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. We were going to talk a little bit about evolution. Connor told us that, evolution began with an explosion in space, and then that explosion made this little tiny cell, and that cell then became bigger, more complex, and those cells began to develop into the plants, the animals, and even human beings that we have. And you can see some of the other pictures that we have up here. Evolution would say that there were monkeys at one time, and those monkeys changed over millions and billions of times until finally we got human beings. And over in here, this picture, there's an animal down at the bottom, and it has a different name. But that animal also changed over many thousands and millions of years until finally we have the horse that we have today. So this is the idea of evolution. Then we said about creation. Oops, that's not going. Not sure what I did there, but we have creation that comes next, and we said God created the world in the 6 days. Then the next thing that I wanted to show you, oh, there we go. The next thing that I wanted to show you were these 2 words here. We talked about fact and we talked about fiction. Who can remember what fact means? What's a fact? Yes, Haley.
That's true.
All right, something that is proved or it's known to be true. And so then what does fiction mean? The other Kaylee.
Something that is made up.
Okay, something that's false, it's not really true, or it's made up. Very good. All right, so we have these 2 ideas. We have evolution and we have creation. And we have to decide which one is true and which one is false. Now, you have to really put on your thinking caps. Last week, we talked about 3 evidences that people that believe in evolution would tell you in order to say that evolution is true. Can anybody remember one of them? All of them? What other? Jet, yes. All right, good job. DNA is one of them. Can you remember any others? No? Connor, can you help him? Fossils, good. Can anybody remember the last one? The last one's pretty tough. Yes, Tyson. Great job, you got it. All right, so we're gonna bring up some pictures here. Here's our fossils, which we said are the remains of living things that have been buried in the earth. And if you'll remember, we talked about last week how evolutionists would say, oh, they found the remains of different animals that don't look like our animals today, and so that is an evidence that they use for evolution. Now, sometimes the things like we mentioned Lucy last week, that's an ape man that they thought that they had uncovered, and they thought it was a transitional form, and it really wasn't. It proved just to be an ape after all. We talked about DNA, and we said DNA is what makes you look like you. And evolutionists will say, well, a lot of our DNA looks alike, and so therefore we all came from that little tiny cell. And there is truth in the fact that there are many things about DNA that look alike. For instance, do all of you have eyes? So there is DNA that tells your body that you need eyes. So you're all going to have some eye DNA. But some of you have brown eyes. Some of you have blue eyes. Some of you might even have green eyes or some other color of eyes. Most of you all have hair, right? So there's some DNA in all of you that says your body needs to make hair. But your hair is different, isn't it? Not very few of you, your hair looks the same. It's different. All right, and then the last thing that we talked about was what Kyson said, and that was mutations. And if you remember, I want to quickly tell you about these birds over here. I told you I had a really interesting story last week, and we didn't really get to talk about it very much, so I want to tell you really quickly today, okay? So, the man who started evolution, he went on a trip, and he went many different places all over the world, and he stopped at this one island, and he saw these birds that were called finches, and he said, oh, these finches don't quite look like the finches back in my country where I'm from. And so he thought, this is an evidence for evolution, because this is a species that's changing, and maybe it's going to change into something else. And so this is what he used as part of his evidence for that. But researchers found out later that this was really what happened. You see, all birds have beaks or mouths according to whatever they eat. So there are some birds that just suck the nectar or the juice out of flowers. And so they don't need a really strong beak to do that. They need something that's really long and kind of skinny in order to get into the flower and to be able to suck all the juice out. There's other birds that eat nuts and seeds. What kind of beaks do you think a bird that eats a nut or a seed needs? What are you thinking, huh? Do you think they need a long, skinny one? No. They probably need something like up in that picture over there, something that's short and something that's really hard in order to crack a nut or crack a shell of something. And so that's the way the finches were. They ate seeds, and this was what their beaks looked like. But in the island where Charles Darwin visited, they were having a drought, and it was really hard to get food. You know, when a drought comes, the rains don't come like they're supposed to. And so there were not seeds and nuts just laying all over the ground. The finches had to work hard in order to get something to eat. In fact, they would have to try to get in between two little rocks, inside the crack in between two rocks, in order to get that food, the seeds that they wanted to eat. And so they needed skinnier beaks in order to be able to do that. And so their beaks began to grow smaller in order for them to be able to get the food out of those little rocks like they needed to. But the interesting thing was, when the drought was all finished, what do you think happened to their beaks? Yeah, their beaks stopped growing skinny and smaller like the one in the bottom picture, and instead they went back to being strong beaks because now the seeds were very easy to find and they were able to do that very easily. So that was the story that I wanted to tell you last week, and we didn't really have time. So anyway, that is a little bit about the evolution and the evidences that we talked about with evolution. Then we talked about some evidences for creation as well. And if you remember, we talked about that. The Bible tells us about creation. And we said there's plenty of evidence that tells us the Bible's true. So if the Bible says that God created the world, then we should believe that. We also talked about that everywhere we look, there is evidence for someone smart making things. We have a picture of a cell phone up here on our screen. And we said our cell phones are very little. So they're small, but they're made up of many different parts. And we know those parts did not just come together by an accident, that somebody smart had to make those and design them and put it all together. Last week we talked about our eye, and our eyes are made up of many, many different parts. And each one of those parts are important and how we needed to use those parts. And somebody smart must have made our eyes and all the parts in it. Everywhere we look, there are things, and we say, somebody smart must have made those things. And that's why we say there's evidence that there's a designer. Things did not just happen by an explosion or by an accident, but there was a designer who created and made those things. And then the last evidence that we talked about last week was a scientific law that said life comes from life. And creation goes along with that scientific principle. We say in the Bible that God, who is a living being, created all other living things. And so that goes along with this scientific principle of life comes from life. It also goes along because it says in the Bible that whatever animal or human being or plant, they give birth to the same kind of animal or plant or human being. And that goes along with our picture up here too. We have a dolphin, and it's going to give birth to a dolphin. It's not going to change as time goes on. But evolution says, oh, there was an explosion. Nothing existed before then, and all of a sudden, now there's a living cell. It's not life coming from life, all right? So those were just a few of the things that we talked about last week. And then this week, we're going to talk a little bit more about creation. And so we want to start looking in our Bibles, and we want to start looking in the very first book of the Bible. So who can tell me what's the very first book of the Bible? Yeah, it's Genesis, isn't it? And the word Genesis actually means beginning. And the book of Genesis tells us about the beginning of many things, but it also tells us about the beginning of the world. So let's begin today then by closing our eyes. I want everyone to close your eyes, close them really tight. And who can tell me, what do you see? Yeah, you don't see anything, do you? It's just darkness, isn't it? Now I want you to keep your eyes closed. Still keeping them closed. Just imagine if that's all you could see. Even if you did open your eyes, there was just darkness everywhere. Well, that's what it was like on our world many years ago. Thousands of years ago, there was no sky up in the heavens. There was no land. There were no trees. There were no flowers. There was no sun, no moon, no birds, no fish, animals of any kind. There weren't even human beings. There was just darkness, just like you're seeing right now. Now, you can go ahead and open your eyes, and we're just going to pretend like this screen up here is darkness, because I've got a black screen up there right now. And so that's going to remind us that there was nothing in the world but just darkness, except that God was there. The Bible tells us that God has always lived.
He's always existed. He never had a beginning. So he was there. And even though there was blackness all around, God had a plan. He had a plan to create a wonderful world in 6 days and also to put man inside of it. And many of you know this very first verse in the Bible. It's Genesis 1:1. Let's say it all together. Ready? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And that's found again in Genesis 1:1. This verse just tells us that God made the world. And if we continue to read down in the verses in this first chapter of Genesis, it'll tell us that God made the world from absolutely nothing. Remember, there was nothing in the world. There was just darkness. And yet God made everything from absolutely nothing. And he made this world in 6 days. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about what God made on the very first day. Remember, there was just darkness. And the Bible kind of says it this way. It says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now you can see I've underlined a few words in this verse, haven't I? Because some of these words are not words that we really use very much. But when it talks about the earth was without form, that means it didn't have a shape. Now we usually think of the earth as in kind of like a circle or a ball, right? But back then, it seems that the earth didn't have that shape yet. So the earth was without a shape, and then it says that word void. That word void just means that it was empty. There was nothing in it, but you can see the word underlined in red. There was just darkness everywhere. And then that verse goes on to explain that somehow God's Spirit was just kind of moving over the earth, and there must have been some water somewhere on the earth, and so God was moving over the water. So remember, the earth was full of darkness, nothing else was there, and then something amazing happened. Something that no human being would be able to do. But God took nothing and he began creating our world. And let's look at Genesis 1, verse 3. And let's go ahead and say that together. It says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. The Bible just tells us that God just spoke, and just like that, there was light. Now, I am going to come, and I'm going to give you something right now from my pocket. And I'm going to give you right here something out of my pocket. Are you ready? Get your hands out. All right, did you get it? All right, can you make light from what I gave you? You can't? Oh, why not? That's right, because I didn't give you anything, did I? There's nothing in my pocket, and what I handed to you was nothing. But that's exactly what God started with. He started with nothing, and yet he made a light. Now, if we wanted to make something, like if we wanted to make a picture, we have to start with paper, maybe a pen, or maybe markers to give it some color, or a paintbrush and paint. We need materials to start with, don't we? But God didn't. He just had nothing. He just spoke, and there was the light. Now, I want to tell you something else about this light. This light was not the sun, because the sun is going to be actually created later on, a few more days later on in the week. But this was a light that God made. We don't really understand everything about this light, but the Bible tells us that God made light on that day, and so we will believe it. Now, if we continue on in our Bible verses, I don't know if you can see it down there, but Genesis 1 and the next verse, verse 4, simply says this, and God saw the light, and it was good. He looked at this light that he had made, and he was very pleased with what he had done. And then if we keep going, the Bible says, and God divided the light from the darkness. So God spoke, and just like that, there was light, and then God separated the light from the darkness. And the next verse tells us something else. It says, God called the light, what? God called the light day, right. And what did he call the darkness? Night, right. So this was the beginning of our days, where we have light time and we have dark time. And you see, God knew all human beings, all living things, needed a time of being active and also a time of rest. So God made the light so that we could have an active time. You go to school during the daytime, you play during the daytime, you might watch TV, you do all kinds of things during that daytime. And then when it gets to be dark time, what do? Yeah, we go to sleep, because God knew that all living things needed a time where they could be active, but they also needed a time to be restful as well. And so even though it doesn't seem really important that God made the light and he separated it into the day and night, it is important, because that's going to be what all things are going to need. And so our world was not just made by chance, not by an accident, but God planned all of these things in a very orderly way. And over the next few weeks, we are going to be learning about what God made every single day. All right, now, that's all we're going to do for our lesson today, but I have just 3 really quick questions for you, okay? At the beginning, what filled the entire world? Good, yeah, it was darkness, wasn't it? Who was the only person in the world at this time? Yeah, it was God. Good job. All right, in what book of the Bible do we find where God created the world? Yes, very good job, Genesis. And last question, what did God create on the first day? Yes, light. And how did he do that? He spoke, and just like that, the light came. Now, we're going to go and do some experiments right now, and so I hope you'll have fun doing that as well. We'll see you next week.
All right, hi boys and girls. We are now ready to do our lab experiments for this week. This week we talked about how God made light. And if you remember in our lesson, we talked about how God made everything just by speaking. He didn't have any materials. He had nothing to start with. Now we're going to try to make light today and try to make electricity, but we have all the materials on our tray today that we're going to use, whereas God did everything with nothing to start with. All right, so our experiment today is to try to make a light shine, and we've got our little light right here. We're going to try to make this come on using some lemons. So the very first thing you want to do is you're going to get a lemon, and you're just going to kind of press it down a little bit, roll it in your hands a little bit or on the table, and that's just to get it a little softer and to get it so that it'll have the juice in there, okay? All right, then we're going to take the clips that we have, and you'll notice we have these clips. Whoops, oh, those ones fell off. Let me just put those ones over here for a minute. All right, so we're going to use this one here, and you'll notice the things that we have. One of them is kind of gold colored, and one of them is silver colored. So we're going to put one of each of those in the different lemons that we have, okay? And then we have these same little clips with our little alligator clips. Now, I want to put the opposite together. So this one is silver, so I'm going to put the gold colored in this one. This one is gold colored already, so I'm going to put the silver in this one. All right, we're going to make sure these are really secure.
And then, oh, Tori, I should be having you do some of this. All right, then we're gonna take our light bulb, and you don't want the two clips to touch, but you're gonna clip one on each side of our light, and we'll see how it works. Got one side on, let's make that go a little bit. Oh, oops, let's try that again, sorry. Yeah, don't make it go back so far. There you go, right like that, okay? And then do the other one, yeah. All right, and can we see that light going on at all? All right, sometimes you have to make sure that you got them clipped on the right side. So let's do them on the other side and see if that works. And our light is not coming on. So sometimes you have to readjust these things and make sure they're really tight. It looks like they're tight. All right, so we're having a little troubles with this time. So we're gonna add a third orange to it, or a lemon, and we're gonna add this on here. Same idea here though. Can you get that end on there? We're just kind of making a series. Okay, so, okay, I'm gonna put that one in there. All right, now let's see if it'll work this time. You get that side, and I will get this side. Get it. And it's still not quite turned on. Let's see if we switch these around. Our light is not coming on. All right, let's try our other clips here then. I'm gonna take these off. And we're gonna add, we need one more clip over there too. Look at all the things that we have to have in order to make this work. All right, you're gonna clip yours onto your other side there. And it's still not working. Is it there? All right, let me try. I'm gonna run this one. Okay, let's see, but now. Oh, did you see it? It's coming on. Can you see it in the camera? I'll try to bring it up a little bit closer. Can you see that it's working? And with the acid that was in the lemons, it's now producing this light that's coming on. It's really faint, but can you see how the light bulb is coming on? All right, now, we also have a little clock here, and we're gonna use the same procedure, and this time, we're just gonna attach the clock to it. And let's see, I'm gonna put the clock up here. Can you see that inside the camera? Can you see it right there? It's not on right now, and what happens when Tori clips the other side on? Do you see that it has numbers on it now? And if we would let this continue, the numbers would start counting just like it would if it was a clock, and it would keep track of the time. All right, so this is a little bit of some fun experiments that we've been doing with our making electricity and trying to show with the light and how we need lots of things in order just to make this little tiny light bulb. And God, out of nothing, just spoke and he created light. All right, now we're gonna try another thing with this same experiment. This time you'll see we have these cups, and inside these cups are just regular Coke, okay? And so this time we're gonna try our same experiment
only with a different kind of material to make the electricity working. All right, so Tori, you're gonna put one of these each ends, and we just have to, again, remember, there's a gold color and there's like a silver color on the ends. And so this side is gold. Oops. We lost our thing. Okay, so we got that out. Let's try that again. All right, so we're gonna put silver over here and gold over here. Okay. All right, and then now you've got gold, and you're gonna put your gold one in, and I'm gonna put my silver one in. So there's a gold and a silver, and there's a gold and a silver in each one. All right, you got it in there? And again, we're gonna try to take these clips and attach them to our light bulb. Oh yeah, put it on there. Oh yeah. Can you see our light again? It's blinking, it's a little red light. You see it? So again, there's acid in the Coke, and that acid is making this light turn in. So we're sort of making this light work. All right, so we had a little trouble keeping our end on, so we just switched our clips. So now we're ready to try again. So we're gonna clip this on here, and you can see our clock still has no numbers on it. Try to clip yours on there, and let's see if the numbers will show up this time. Oh, and there you go. There, our clock is working, the numbers are back. And again, if it kept going, it would just keep track of the seconds and the minutes. All right, so here's our last experiment, and this, you'll see we have another light bulb, and then we have our two different clips, and this time we're just gonna use a simple battery, and we're gonna attach or just touch the battery to each end, and then you can see, make sure and keep it on the metal, and you see how our light is lighting up. Again, all of our experiments today, we're trying to show that we need materials in order to make this light come on. We can't just speak and say, let there be light, but that was what God did. God is truly an amazing God, and he was the creator of light on day number 1, as we talked about today. All right, we'll be back next week with some more experiments. See you then.